Everything's normal. You're listening to Contesting Wrestling Premium. Because you're better than other people. You've made the right choices. And thank you for doing that.
Give us
Today,
more money.
yes, yeah, that's the ultimate form of love. As we live in America in 2020, and that's how we express ourselves with money. It's all right today. Little bit of a break in the pattern. Usually, a premium episode is about. I mean, I guess it's not really that much.
It's
of a break
still
in
a
the pattern.
compliment
Yeah.
to the
Yeah.
main episode. Since we watched a Lucha Underground match in our main feed episode, guest starring Jordan Olds, for the premium, we're watching more Lucha Underground. We've been trying to get Evan to watch this serial in its entirety, and so, well, we're off to a start of sorts now, watching the pilot episode.
And I have
Welcome
never
to the
seen
temple.
anything beyond the pilot either, so good opportunity for me to watch it as well.
Excellent, yes.
Yeah, I've seen bits and pieces from the series, but I only really consistently watched the first several episodes in a row, so I'm looking forward to checking out more also. Everything I see is very creative. Well, we'll get into it.
I have watched the entire series. I can say it just gets better as it goes on.
I made an account with Tubi, which is a free streaming app whose content really lets you know that it's free. It's really you're looking through what they got there, and you're like, "Yep, nobody's paying for any of this." And surely I will watch Lucha Underground and then Looper, which I never saw, and then that's it. That's all I'm going to. So I guess if Tubi was going to advertise here, this is gonna burn that bridge. But it's fine. But yeah, so we'll watch it. I will talk about this on the minisodes, or there will be one or two other premium episodes that come out, or more as time goes on, about Lucha Underground. But yeah, so today we're talking about the pilot, which is available on Tubi TV. I don't even fucking know.
Tubi TV, the app.
Tubi. Tubi.
Booby TV, got it.
It's on titties.com.
Or is that a different streaming service?
So there were 3 matches on this pilot, so it actually also kind of fits into our normal format of good and bad matches for sure.
Yeah, but I mean, we're not just gonna list the matches and be clinical about this, are we? With Lucha Underground,
I will always be clinical about everything.
He's a doctor.
Exactly.
Well,
I did watch you do philosophical surgery on a guy at a party who stared too deeply into the abyss, and you had to get in there. And
that was when I convinced him I was on acid and chased him out of the apartment with a battle axe, right?
oh yeah, oh that was an amazing story. And then years later, the real climax. So that was a real thing that happened in high school.
Was there actually a battle axe?
There was. This was the only time
Why was there a battle axe?
because our friend Henry had weapons.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
this is the only time in my life that I've successfully intimidated someone.
Ben chases this guy out of the house who nobody cared for. I mean, it was justifiable at the time. Years later,
Well, justifiable because we wanted his weed.
well, yeah, that too.
Oh, here comes Evan with his 4 justifiable homicides.
that in America, it's more overseas. And years later, I'm at a party, and somebody mentions, I can't remember. I hope that I wasn't dumb enough where somebody just mentioned that guy. And I was like, I have a fun story about that guy. But that could have been what happened. I could have been that careless. And then I tell the story about that happening. It was hilarious. And then the person at this party looks at me in the eyes and says, "That was me. That you just told. I'm the guy who been chased with an axe out of the house, and that was a traumatic event for me. And you just told it like it was a funny story." And I was like, in my defense, it was a funny story for everybody else involved. And I left. I mean, I understand. It's not. I shouldn't have stuck around.
And then he killed 4 people.
And then he committed unjustifiable homicides, understandable homicides, but that's a different legal classification.
And that's why you had to kill him.
So speaking of menacing with violence,
admitting to a lot of crimes on today's episode. That's what you get on the premium episodes.
Yeah. We also regularly have memorials to poor Hobarth.
Poor Hobarth Abelson, who did not get the
Hobarth
Highlander
Abelson.
gene. So what were you saying? I forgot.
So the show pretty much starts off with Dario Cueto, played by Luis Fernandez Gil, who's the owner and operator of the Lucha Underground Fight Club, which in the story, that's the idea, is that it's some kind of underground fight club. He somehow got control over this through the AAA promotion in Mexico. I don't remember exactly how that all came together.
He is a rich man. He bought it. It's his temple.
It's also not a stadium where children can cheer for their heroes. He makes that clear.
No.
They make it clear that he is from Spain and operating in Mexico.
Yes.
And it left me, well, I actually don't know exactly how analogous like Mexico's relationship is to Spain to like our relationship with the UK or something. Like I don't know if that makes him more of a heel. I don't know if that just makes him.
It would make him more of a heel.
Yeah,
I don't think the culture is exactly analogous, but it definitely makes him more of a heel.
I mean, they didn't spend the last 70 years invading countries together like we did with the UK, which that really bonds you in a lot of ways. But
Well,
It does.
I think it's especially fraught of a relationship. They're making such a big deal about the Aztec heritage of the Mexican wrestlers to be contrasted with the fucking imperialist power that conquered them.
Yeah, they also make it very clear that he's rich by giving him a literal briefcase full of money.
Oh, yeah. Oh, and let's just, listeners, if you're not familiar, the basic, as far as I can tell from this pilot and what else and the one or two other matches I've seen, the basic idea behind this show is that it is a really good wrestling show, and then around it is like a Mexican crime drama.
The show itself needs a lot more context. It's not just, pro wrestling show. So here's Dario Cueto and his underground fight club. This show is very high concept. When it came out, it was unlike anything that had ever been tried before. Instead of just being a wrestling league that's supposed to be a sporting event that sports fans can come to and enjoy the competition for the championship, it's a full-on telenovela. That's what it's supposed to be. But it's a format of television that is very popular in Mexico. It's very popular here in New York because we have a lot of Spanish-speaking people here. There are American soap operas, but they're not quite telenovelas, and this is supposed to be more of that. So the fact that the conceit of sports is taken completely out, in that it's completely fictionalized, that has to be pointed out before we do anything else. So it completely forgives a lot of the more like supernatural talking elements that they talk about in the show, because you'll accept that on a television show.
And
not necessarily
the aesthetic in general is more like a kind of grindhouse movie, and Robert Rodriguez being the executive producer of the show, that makes a lot of sense. And it really is, they've gotten as far away from the feel of traditional pro wrestling as anything ever has, I think.
And yet I do feel like they still do a good job of, even though it is much more overtly a televised drama than other wrestling, they still do a good job of, like, even though it's not approached like a sport, like it is still 100% approached like a TV show, it is still very much about the athleticism. And, like, the commentators are extremely not dumb and say things that I was like, oh, that's interesting. Oh, that's a funny joke. What's happening right now? I'm not just getting a lot of fucking drivel into my ear.
Well, the commentators themselves, there's Matt Stryker, who's a New Yorker. He was on the front page of the New York Post. He got fired as a New York City school teacher because he was using his sick days to wrestle. He trained, he's a Johnny Rods guy. He was in the WWE for years as a wrestler and then a commentator. And he's one of the first guys who was a full-on smart mark that was doing commentary. We were watching this, Katie. You pointed out Josh Matthews probably predated him in that.
Yes, definitely. Josh Matthews was the first commentator I can remember that would like commentate for WWE, but would still try to get references into other companies, and he had to like make up stories to get it under the radar. He would talk in like full like riddles kind of on Velocity that if you listened hard enough were WCW and indie references.
Yep. And to contrast the very scholarly Matt Stryker, who wants to tell you specifically why everything is interesting, is Vampiro. And Vampiro is a very interesting figure in professional wrestling. He's a Canadian by birth. He moved to Mexico when he was young to train in Lucha Libre, became one of the biggest stars in the history of Lucha Libre, and completely lived that life. Put in a couple of years in WCW, but by the time he was poised to become a big star in America, his body had started failing him. It didn't stop him from continuing to wrestle for years and years. And here he is as one of the strangest emissaries of Lucha Libre, speaking in the vernacular, in everybody's vernacular at once. So I'm a big fan of the commentary team as well.
To your earlier point, Evan, despite having this really aesthetic change away from traditional wrestling, you're right that they're able to preserve all of the things that wrestling fans care about in wrestling. The hierarchy, the championships, the alliances, and all of that stuff. They don't lose that in that transition. And I think it's similar to, like, say, in a very different way to what XSW is able to do. Really change the way that wrestling is presented while still keeping the core of what matters to wrestling fans.
You hear that, everyone? Watch XSW.
Do.
Extremely serious wrestling.
I love how
it's a television show about a wrestling league fight club. It's not a wrestling league that's televised.
I love at one point Stryker goes off on this whole rant about go use the internet, learn about all of the styles of wrestling because they're all really interesting. And I was just like,
yeah,
well,
talk about something you'd never ever hear on WWE.
There are definitely moments where he gets a little too smarky. Like a few episodes in, I think he really pissed me off when he was like, our guys, they really kick each other. They don't do any leg slapping like those other places. It's like, one, yes, they do. And two, please don't draw attention to that, Matt Stryker.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one.
And but it does seem like a great translation of Mexican wrestling to America, where it seems like they still, we talked in the episode with Jordan about how Mexican wrestling kind of does the two things, at least, that I love the most about wrestling, which is the, nigh supernatural theatricality and like the, very lithe, high-flying, agile style of wrestling. And it does, it does both of those things really well. And it also, I like, in the second match, not to get too ahead of ourselves, but when Son of Havoc comes out, I was just like, this dude is an American luchador. Like, This dude is, like, it's the same sort of, like, he's sort of a guy, and he's sort of an archetype, and he's sort of like an American folkloric spirit. Kind of, I could be fucking reading way too into it, but this was my interpretation of it, at least. Where he's just sort of this dude that would be floating about in the ether in a way that I feel like a lot of luchador characters are.
That is not his voice, by the way. Not even a little.
Really?
I'd
also
like to say it's refreshing to watch a wrestling product that's not just painfully white. That's just not good.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Agreed. Yeah, like there are a couple of white guys on this show, but it's not,
the people who made
not the majority, Oh yeah. Well, the El Rey Network, this was one of the debut shows on the El Rey Network. And the El Rey Network, the idea of it is it's for young Latino people in America who speak English and Spanish, which is people will go on about the growing Latino demographic. It's like, well, who are these people? A lot of them are people who have roots in America and in Mexico or other Latin American countries, and both sides have to be serviced. And if you can do that correctly, business-wise, that's a gold mine. And that's what they're trying to do with this.
So
the whole network.
So the first match we get is, really clearly trying to root the whole thing in traditional Lucha Libre. So we get Blue Demon Jr. against Chavo Guerrero Jr., two third-generation wrestlers with, historic legacies behind them in their families in Lucha Libre. And it's, okay.
Well, they do a lot of basic wrestling. They do a lot of reversals and holds and up and down. They don't rest a lot.
Chavo looks great.
But I thought it was a very good... I thought it was a very good, like, establishing shot.
No, it was great as like an opening match to be like, okay, this is the kind of wrestling we're gonna have on the
I
show.
mean, I don't know a lot about Blue Demon Jr. You know, his father was one of like Santos' rivals or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
He's been around for a while. Junior has been around for quite a while, and I'm not super familiar with his stuff. I gotta say, though, I wasn't really impressed with this match. I thought Chavo worked really, really hard to make the guy look good, and Blue Demon's stuff was just kind of sloppy and clunky throughout the whole match.
It was the best game of Mercy I've ever seen. I actually was somewhat. I enjoyed. I actually felt like it was a contest of strength.
And then in the end, Chavo tapped to Blue Demon's like sharpshooter looking kind of thing, which was
Yeah, that happened real
anticlimactic,
fast. I
yeah.
felt like that finish was real sudden.
yeah.
Like I blinked and then I had missed the tap out.
Something that I think applies to all the matches on this show. The person you thought would win, or maybe who had wanted to win, did not win. At least in my case, any of these matches. And I think that's sort of important for a pilot episode of a wrestling show, right? We talk about how in wrestling, part of what you want to do is show the audience what they want and then take it away from them and then make them sort of work to get it finally in the way that's most satisfying in the end. And we see the beginning of that here.
Well, Chavo losing ends up being a story point. You know, between the matches, it's not just, oh, here's a backstage interviewer talking to somebody. They have, scenes filmed elsewhere, Dario Cueto talking down Chavo in the locker room, like, I thought you'd be able to get the job done. Well, you can't, and I'm not going to give you the money. Dario Cueto at the top, by the way, promises $100,000, which he has, money in a briefcase, to whoever impresses him the most that night. And he also promised violence.
Yes.
He was very happy to bring violence.
Violence was one of the great virtues that he believes a luchador should have.
Yes.
It's also very smart to have a wrestler just react, because Chavo didn't say anything, because most wrestlers can't deliver prepared lines very well, which is not knocking on them, but it's, a lot of times they don't sound, and so maybe Chavo's a great actor, I don't know. But in that moment, in that scene, it was all facial reaction, and I felt like it felt very powerful. I felt his struggle. It was great. And then, have the guy who's an actor, have him do the acting. That's
right.
This is the right division of
Yeah,
labor.
exactly.
In general, the Lucha Underground production team just worked miracles with these guys to film scenes that are compelling with people who, if you ever saw them cut a promo outside, were not doing very well at all.
I mean, I don't know how much this is his influence or anything like that. But when I was young, when I was like 13, I read Robert Rodriguez's book about making El Mariachi, and which was like a super inspiring, because he, there was a whole, he submitted himself to medical experimentation and all this stuff, trying to raise money to make, and then made El Mariachi for $7,000, which, I mean, that was in 1990, so adjusted for inflation, that's $1.18 million now. But at the time, it wasn't a lot, and it's really inspiring. But yeah, there's something about the idea, his movies, even if his movies can be fucking stupid sometimes, I feel like he just knows how to use things, especially making good shit on the cheap involves knowing people who are really talented and knowing how to use them properly and put them in the right play. And I don't know, that's
yeah, exactly. Well, Lucha Underground had I couldn't give you the numbers. It had a high enough budget for television, and one of the big things that eventually stopped it was that it just couldn't make it back because it wasn't as big enough of a hit. But they definitely used what they had very well. The production was excellent.
They hired that band.
By the way,
they hired that band.
by the way, about Chavo's acting chops or lack thereof.
Yeah.
He's in Glow.
Oh, who is he in Glow?
He's
You've seen 2 episodes of
Yeah,
Glow,
he's-
meaning to watch the rest.
he's a wrestler. I mean,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Oh, all
he
right.
was one of the guys on Glow that they hired to help teach the teach the women
Yeah, I
to
think
wrestle.
he helps train them
Another
at the
one of
beginning.
those-
Yeah.
There was another wrestler in this that was on Glow that Evan probably recognized later on, much later on. No?
In this episode.
Yeah. You didn't recognize him?
Well, in the main event, we have Johnny Mundo. He was on one of the first episodes of Glow that I did actually see.
Oh,
He
really?
was he was straight up in a role. He was the one in the first episode they bring out to like train the girls that are there auditioning.
Oh, okay. I see.
And
If it was the first season, I saw it whenever it came out.
Yeah,
Okay,
he's
that's
the
fair.
one that like there's the one girl there who doesn't really want to be there but gets hired because her dad was a wrestler. Remember?
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's the guy who recognizes who her dad was and starts like freaking out.
He's like a
The names are escaping me.
He's like a sexual deity.
Yeah,
Yes.
I would say.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. He just even like
Absolutely.
and yes.
One of my. Go on.
just great ass. That was it. That was all I had.
I just wanted to say a little bit more about Chavo before we move on. I think he's been a very
Chavo.
great positive force backstage in contemporary wrestling, in Lucha Underground, elsewhere. Apparently, he's one of the only people. Him and Chris Jericho were the only people who reached out to Chris Benoit's surviving son after all of that went down. He's worked on a bunch of comic books and stuff. I wasn't a huge fan of his when he was on TV all the time. But as you know, he was almost always a heel and almost always enhancement talent for someone else. But
Yeah, I appreciate him a lot more
For
now.
Same here, yeah.
all right, so do you want to talk about the main
before-
event since we were already talking about?
Well, let's talk about the middle match for a sec.
Yes,
Okay.
for a little bit at least.
So yeah, Son of Havoc, his gigantic beard, his plain mask,
His bootleg disposable
like-
teens that he comes out to.
Yeah, he is, you know, I don't mean this insultingly. I mean this as a compliment, but he is very much generic lucha villain number one. And he comes out and his promo might as well have just been, "Hey, I'm the bad guy." But it worked. It worked perfectly for what they were
He's
going
like
to do.
a biker. I think
Yeah.
Sons of Anarchy was really popular. at
Yeah,
the
Sons
time.
of Anarchy was big at the time.
And it's very clearly because this is also a match that is very much a statement of intent for what Lucha Underground is going to be about, and he very much is like a collection of he's the toxic masculinity man. That's really what it is. He's a
Right.
collection of man stereotypes, specifically pitched against the main character of this match, who then comes out.
The guy under the mask
sexy
is
style.
M-Dog20, Matt Cross, who is an indie journeyman, a great athlete, but, you know, as M-Dog20 or Matt Cross, never really made it very far because he didn't have much of a character. And he's another example of Lucha Underground taking someone and making them interesting. And as much as he's sort of one-dimensional here, he gets more complex as the seasons go on.
The Matt Cross, they literally cast him on Tough Enough to make a statement out of him, to make an example out of him. Do you remember that,
Yes.
Ben and
Yeah,
Doc?
so
I do.
you know, at the time when he was in Tough Enough,
Buh.
WWE was known for being like really bare, like especially when you first came in and were hired and trained, like they wanted you to just know the fundamentals and do everything super basic. So with that backdrop, when he's in Tough Enough, they ask all the people like, all right, show us what you got. And M-Dog has in his mind, like, all right, well, I better show them that I'm really good at the basics. So doesn't do any of the really cool, crazy flips that he's able to do. And they were like, why didn't you do any cool, crazy flips and stuff? And is that what you were referring to, Katie?
Basically,
That incident?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, it seemed like it seemed like it was a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. They eliminated him.
Yeah.
Didn't he go home like first or second, something
Yeah.
like that?
I think it was second. Yeah. They
Yeah,
sent
it
him home
seemed
real
like they
fast.
honestly probably wanted to send him home early just to be like, see, what you did on the Indies doesn't matter. Like, in a very way that was
They
public.
had that attitude at the time, for sure.
Yes.
Yeah, things have thankfully changed, at least somewhat. Well, a lot of indie guys are in the WWE now. This was before the modern independent scene took
Right.
over wrestling.
I was thinking more that they wanted to do it not to anyone on the indies, because in the business it was already known. Like in the business, it was already known that what you did on the indies when you get to the WWE didn't matter, because at the time it didn't matter, and it was known that just
Right.
because you were indie didn't mean WWE would ever have an intention of picking you up. But I think it was more done to like as kind of like to set an example to the growing smart fan base, which at the time was exploding, like rapidly increasing in size, and they didn't know what to do with that about that yet.
Right.
So they made an example out of this semi-popular indie guy. Like, well, look, here's an indie darling. We don't give a fuck.
You can
'Cause it was
chant
done on
CM
TV.
Punk all
Yeah.
you want. We're not going to push him. Right?
Right.
Something like that.
So, Son of Havoc's opponent is Sexy Star, who's one of the best characters in Lucha Underground going forward. Her arc is very interesting. And here we get the beginning where, as you said, Evan, it's a kind of statement of intent.
Did she have like some kind of pre-existing? They make it seem like she was a big star in Mexico.
Evan's
You
got
froze,
Evan.
Evan.
Oh,
I
my
didn't- I
fucking
didn't
frozen
hear that.
again. God damn
This
it.
usually clears up within like 15 seconds.
Hopefully that will happen.
I see his thumb slowly moving.
I am under the impression he can hear
I
us.
hope so. I hope by now at least.
Evan, give us a sign.
That was kind of a sign. Oh, he's catching up. I think he's catching up.
I don't see anything.
Okay.
I hear. Oh,
Am I back?
you're still freezing
Yeah,
hard.
Evan, we haven't heard any of that.
Okay. Can you hear me? Am I at least?
So it went from the beginning. Okay.
Okay. Am I?
It went from the beginning of your question to you now cursing. So I think I can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah, now
Am
we
I
can
back
hear you.
now?
Oh, you're
Okay.
caught up.
So
You're
we
back.
didn't hear
Okay, good.
anything you said about Sexy Star yet.
Sexy
Okay.
star.
Was they make it seem like she has a whole pre-existing career in Mexico as this character? I could not tell if that was part of the show or if that was true or not. That's
She
all.
did
That's
at the
my whole
time,
question.
yeah.
No, she had been Sexy Star for a long time.
Yeah, she was a very big star.
Yeah,
as
there's
Sexy Star.
a story from before these times, and there's a story from after these
Yeah.
times. So we'll get to what happened to Sexy Star in a minute.
What year is
But
this
there's a story that
pilot
goes.
from?
Oh,
This is
there's
2014 when
Okay.
it started.
Yeah, there's a story. The story that goes around about Sexy Star is that she was popular enough that she got a tryout, and they notoriously, and this was a big statement that by them on what they thought of women's wrestling at the time. They told her she was too, and this wasn't the whole spiel they gave her. There were
This is
other things that
WWE?
made them not her. This is WWE. She got a tryout, and they told her that she was too ugly under her mask, which she is not.
Yeah, this is 2011.
She's just not conventionally attractive.
At the time, they still only wanted to hire what they would consider tens to pose in the nudie magazines.
Meanwhile,
I mean,
Sexy Star.
She had other
Yeah.
problems.
Well, she at the time, she's an MMA fighter as well. Like she is a
Wow.
legitimate fighter.
Yeah,
She is
now.
now.
Oh, now okay.
Well, what happened? What happened was she had come back to wrestling after leaving and coming back and leaving and coming back. The last straw was in 2017. She came back and had a match with somebody that wasn't going to her liking, so she just started shooting on her opponent and almost broke her arm.
I think she
And,
did break
like,
her arm. Like
she
intentionally.
break her
yeah.
arm?
This was
Yeah.
in Mexico.
Well,
and
this was in
she's
Mexico.
been like
Which
blacklisted from the wrestling business since then.
Yeah. Just so we're clear, breaking arms is frowned
Yes.
upon. I mean, breaking
Yes.
them on purpose. Accidents happen.
I think
Accidents
she
happen.
thought her
We're all
opponent
aware of
was
that.
taking liberties with her in the match, and then so
Well, she wasn't.
Yeah.
It turns out.
So the best possible outcome, I think, is that people were like, hey, man, if you want to really fight, just really fight. So she started boxing. She had a 5-0 boxing career, and then she went into mixed martial arts, signed with what's the name of the promotion she signed with? Not Promo Azteca. That's an old Mexican wrestling company. In any case, she signed with an MMA group, and she's now 2-0 in MMA. And she's decided, maybe I'll just really fight if I want to really fight. So good for her.
Yeah, good for her. Like, she wasn't welcome anymore after that.
Right.
So in this match, Lucha Underground is by far, I mean, I guess someone could make an argument for Impact, but I think it's by far the most prominent wrestling promotion on television that has featured intergender wrestling.
Yeah.
As like an inherent part of it, as like not even something special. Just like they're just men and women wrestle each other. They have men and women on the roster and they all fight.
At the time, yes. Now I would say it's Impact.
Well, yeah, I mean, Lucha Underground isn't there anymore. I guess, I don't know, does Impact get, I don't know what kind of ratings Impact gets these days.
I think more people watch Impact than watched Lucha Underground.
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
I don't have exact numbers, but at this point, Lucha Underground was also during a low point for Impact when it didn't quite know what it was going to be again yet.
So,
like that weird transition period when they were stopping being TNA but weren't quite Impact yet.
So they make, as you pointed out, Evan, they make a big deal about, Son of Havoc's like, I'm not going to wrestle a woman. Like, you should just go quit. And then he turns his back and she jumps him from behind. And they wrestle for a while. And eventually Son of Havoc beats her fairly handily. But, that's just sort of the pit that she's in that she needs to climb her way out of. And the story moving forward is going to be her doing that.
I figured while I was watching it that this was the beginning of a storyline for her.
Yeah. And, even though he beats her fairly easily, it seems like he does pull her tights, so he does cheat a little bit. So there's at least like the question mark if he didn't do that.
And she got offense in too. She got like believable offense in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I completely bought their fight.
Yeah, and that's important. Like, even though they did like kind of do the obligatory, I don't want to fight a woman, it was clear to everyone watching that in this context they are supposed to be on equal footing. And wrestling has not, especially before this, has not always. It's not always achieved that when they've done this. So good for Lucha Underground establishing it correctly right up front.
I think, it works in Lucha Underground, especially because of the sort of supernatural elements. Whether it's a gender thing or just like a huge size differential or something like that, it's easier for them to portray someone who visually doesn't look like they could. I mean, Sexy Star and Son of Havoc are about the same size, so it doesn't apply that much in this case. But in general, even if there's a real visual disadvantage, you can sort of understand how that advantage can be compensated for given, superpowers.
How does it get more overt or maybe you don't want to tell me?
Oh yeah. Oh, it gets like full on paranormal.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I'm going to be very sad that this was canceled, but hopefully it'll go on to be a cult classic.
Was it ever technically canceled or did it just fade away because of a bunch of various bullshit?
It was that thing where they were waiting for a contract for the next season for too many years, and by now they have so few people under contract, if any. It's over.
I don't think anyone could possibly be under contract legally anymore.
Yeah, probably not.
Yeah, Jordan had mentioned that they had done some kind of dirty stuff, or they hadn't treated the wrestlers very well. But I have to look into it, and maybe for the mini-sode on that, we'll talk about it a bit more.
The contracts were very they were done with the idea that the people issuing the contracts were going to be the powerful network that was going to be able to give their guys a lot of work.
Right.
But most of the contracts signed were like 7-year exclusive deals where you couldn't wrestle anywhere else on television with any distribution. But we will be cranking out seasons of Lucha Underground, and they were planning to do house shows, which they never really did. They did a few, and they were planning like a lot more. It just never really took off. The problem then, when it didn't really take off, is that there was all this top talent with contracts and no work, and they couldn't go work anywhere else that would pay them. And there was a lot of arbitration, and one by one, everyone got out of their contracts, and it was messy.
Lawsuits.
If Lucha Underground had been a hit, all of those guys probably would have gotten rich off of those contracts, but it wasn't.
Yeah, and it's part of the the clash between Hollywood style contracts, I think, and wrestling contracts.
At least for however bad wrestling contracts are, at least Hollywood contracts are notoriously fair and respectful of performers.
Well, I don't think they prevent you most of the time. They don't prevent you from getting other work.
Well, they had to abolish the studio system. Look, Hollywood contracts are a lot like wrestling contracts, except plus however long the actors in Hollywood have been unionized,
Yes,
which
absolutely.
the wrestlers
Yeah.
have failed to do so far.
Yeah, they are.
So that'll sum that up
For
right quick.
all my snark, they are certainly better. On average, I
Yeah.
think like if you have a recurring part on even a show that nobody really watches, they are still probably treating you better than even somebody relatively high up in the WWE, where you're getting
you
paid
might
well
win
but still not being treated well.
When WWE guys do movies, even WWE Studios movies, because they're, done by the people in Hollywood, they're always so shocked at how nicely they're treated on set. Not that, like, people are coming up to you backstage at Monday Night Raw and being like, hey, you, fuck you. But more like, man, it's like, and these aren't like really big budget movies, but they're like, I'm in my trailer where, it's just me. And then an assistant comes in and is like, what do you want for dinner? And I'm like, well, what do you got? And they're like, no, what do you want? We have people to go to any restaurant in LA and bring you whatever.
Steak?
And yeah, exactly. You want us to go to the steakhouse, bring you steak and potatoes, we'll bring you steak and potatoes. Whereas, backstage at WWE, there's catering.
Also, if you have...
And there's a strict hierarchy over when you eat at catering based on how big of a star you are. So just shit like that.
Also, if you have a small role in a hit movie, you might get a whole bunch of residuals for that. Whereas there is no royalties or residuals whatsoever for appearances on wrestling events. Jesse Ventura tried to make that happen at some point, but it didn't.
Oh, they paid him off. And then they scrubbed him from a lot of the stuff that he was on for years. He's back on most of it, though.
And remember who the union buster in those situations were? It was Hulk Hogan.
Of course. Of course
Word is from Ventura that Hogan went to Vince to rat out Ventura for trying to talk about unions with the guys. Hogan and Ventura had like rivalries going way back. Both of them were character-wise were clones of superstar Billy Graham from the 70s. Hogan always did it better, and Ventura always hated him for it. But Ventura also had a lot better ideas for the guys. It's one of the reasons he got out. He maintains to this day he would work for Vince McMahon if Vince was willing to pay him what he's worth, and they both know what he's worth.
Only there was a wrestlers union. I was reading. I have to read up on this a little bit more, but I was reading a really fascinating thread on Twitter from somebody who seemed like they know what they were talking about. But of course, this could be bullshit. They was talking about how animation in Japan was always more interesting than animation in America, for broadly speaking. Specifically because there were strikes that happened. There was a strike that happened at Disney in like the 30s or the 40s, and then there was a strike that happened at the biggest Japanese animation studio at the time, around the same time or a little later. I guess whenever it was really popping off, and whenever the industry was really growing, and that Hayao Miyazaki was a big part of. Apparently, like Hayao Miyazaki was known as a labor leader in the industry. And basically just like Walt Disney absolutely destroyed any possibility of an animators union, like put the whole industry on lockdown in America. And then that actually led in a big way to his contributions to like the Red Scare and the purges in Hollywood. And then whereas in Japan, they emerged a really, really strong animators union where just in general artists got to keep the rights to things, and they got a lot more freedom, and people got a lot more residuals.
To this day, one of the worst jobs in Hollywood is an animator on really big budget films that on paper should make hundreds of millions of dollars, but all the people that work on them end up getting paid almost nothing for 80-hour-a-week jobs.
That's why all those guys at Disney put all of that like sexy stuff into Aladdin and shit, right? To get back at them.
It's why they do. It's why they don't air cartoons live too. Also, it puts a tremendous strain on the animators' wrists.
Exactly.
Speaking of which, when we start doing the Contesting Wrestling Movie Club, like we were looking through the fucking listeners, we were looking through the Wikipedia page for WWE Studios, which is amazing. There was so much I didn't know about before, including Surf's Up 2. where it seems like the WWE bought the rights to the Surf's Up franchise, which was an animated movie about surfing penguins from the mid-2000s that they then made a sequel to over 10 years later, featuring the voices of Triple H and Vince McMahon, replacing, like...
Yes.
I don't know, whoever's Cameron Diaz or whoever was in the fucking other one. Sorry.
Did Triple H or Vince McMahon play Cameron Diaz's
I can't
part?
remember.
Yes.
Yes is the answer to that.
Yes.
Anyway, so the main event of Lucha Underground, the thing that before the actual main event, where they're in Dario Cueto's office and he's speaking to wrestling mover and shaker Conan. Now, Conan is, for those of you who don't know, Evan, you probably never heard of Conan. So Conan was a gigantic Lucha Libre star also. With the AAA promotion, they challenged, in the early 90s, they challenged traditional Lucha Libre with a slightly more Americanized product because Lucha Libre had stagnated for a very long time. And him and his AAA promotion really blew the roof down and brought a bunch of new life into Lucha Libre in Mexico. He was the guy that gave big breaks to guys like Rey Mysterio and Psychosis and Juventud Guerrera.
He's
the guy.
important.
He's important, yes. He's the guy who brought all of those guys to WCW in the 90s and was like, America, check these guys out.
He was the first one who went there, right?
Yeah, he went to WCW under his mask. They billed him as the Mexican champion. He was he was some champion in AAA. Championship belts mean something a little different in Mexico. I won't get into it too much. So his character here, he doesn't necessarily respect Dario Cueto, but he'd like some of that money that Dario is spending. And that establishes that, they're both pretty much gangsters, but they respect each other as businessmen. And Conan is like, I got this guy. He's from around here. He's from Los, as he said. Like, he's from Los Angeles, but he's got Aztec blood. And he introduces Prince Puma. Yeah.
They announced him specifically as from Boyle Heights.
Yeah.
Where the temple is.
Where the temple is. Like this hood. And he introduces Prince Puma, who I believe he's the first big top babyface here. As we see, he's an incredible physical specimen. He has incredible body control, incredible acrobatic control. He looks so cool. And his opponent, as Dario Cueto found, somebody who has all of those things too, possibly to a greater degree. My favorite thing about the non-wrestling in this episode is when Dario Cueto says, "I found a man who has many names." And I'm like, that's such a cheesy, stupid thing, except this man has wrestled under many names.
Many names.
And many names that would imply you to know who he is when he just says Johnny Mundo. His name's John Hennigan. He won Tough Enough one year. He won Tough Enough for the WWE.
He's unarguably the best winner of Tough Enough.
Yes,
the most successful winner.
And he wrestled in the WWE under several names. For a little while, they couldn't figure out exactly what to call him. His first. Well, hold
Johnny
on.
Nitro.
His first gimmick was to be
yeah.
Eric Bischoff's assistant when he was the general manager. So first they call him Johnny Spade, which a couple of weeks ago they're like, that sounds bad, and then people don't like that. So they changed his name to Johnny Blaze, to which somebody says, that's Ghost Rider, right? Johnny Blaze. So then they changed it to Johnny Nitro, which is a reference to him being Eric Bischoff's assistant. That stuck for several years. He was in a tag team.
Didn't he even, when he was Johnny Nitro, not to interrupt, Doc,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
before you get too ahead, didn't he even have like a Nitro-esque entrance theme?
Yes, he had a theme. I think he might have come out to the theme from Monday Nitro for a while. And then they put him in a tag team, and he kept that name. And when the tag team broke up, Eminem, they gave him a full gimmick indectomy and had him do kind of a quasi Jim Morrison gimmick and called him John Morrison. And he'd come out spouting nonsensical poetry about the Palace of Wisdom. Shit.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
The best part of and they still do this in WWE, when he makes his entrance, they go into slow-mo.
slow-mo.
Just so we
Jumbo
can all look at him a little bit longer.
At one point, one of the commentators, at one point, Stryker says to Vampiro, "Did you ever have abs like that?" And Vampiro goes, "Yeah, back in the day."
And he did. Yeah, that's the
He
thing.
totally did.
It's true.
Not anymore, right? But yeah, because of all of that, when he's like Johnny Mundo, if you're not a big wrestling fan, well, Johnny Mundo will impress you. And if you are, you're like, oh, I know who he's talking about. And then Johnny Mundo came out, and him and Prince Puma had one heck of an acrobatic fight, didn't they?
And Prince Puma
Yeah,
is
absolutely.
Ricochet.
And Prince Puma is Ricochet. And this is the only time I've really liked Ricochet.
I like Ricochet.
I agree, Ricochet.
He's an incredible athlete, an amazing athletic performer, but just not very interesting as a character ever. And I just never really liked his face. So put him under a mask, a really cool looking mask, and somehow he's all of a sudden super charismatic and interesting and intense in the ring, and his matches make sense.
The magic of Lucha Libre.
It was the magic of Lucha Underground. It took these guys who otherwise were really missing something as performers and somehow covered that up.
I guess that is, I keep discovering more and more about the power of context. In not that I was anti-context before, not like I was ever like, I only want to know things unrelated to other things.
I want purely modular knowledge.
Evan is lying. He is
I am.
hardcore
I'm
anti-context.
Yeah, the only website he ever goes to is he hits the random button on Wikipedia. And
That's
reads the
it. I
first
don't want it. And
paragraph.
if it's a subsection of another Wikipedia page, I want nothing to fucking do with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You hit the random button again.
But it is remarkable as we go through this how much the difference between matches I'm interested in and matches I'm not interested in, it has like less and less to do with the wrestling as time goes on, where it really is a lot more about, on one level, who are these characters? What is this about? What is the storyline about? Then on another meta level, which is something I hadn't thought as much about until we started watching Lucha Underground, because the whole meta context is different, because the whole framework is different, because the whole story being told is different, that has a huge impact on how you feel about the in-ring wrestling. That said, I did get a little bored towards the end of this match.
It's still a little much with all the flips and stuff.
Yeah, it does get a little tiring. There are ways in which I saw how Japanese wrestling, because they pull it back just a little bit more, you get less exhausted by it, but then they make it 40 minutes longer, so you get tired by that. So who fucking cares? But
I mean, John Morrison is the king of unnecessary spins.
yes.
Did you know that he does parkour? From listening to the commentary.
They did yell parkour when he started doing parkour. At one point, he just parkoured up into the ring, and Matt Striker was like, "Parkour."
Like, I look at Doc as we're watching this match, and I'm like, I know they're doing moves, but there's just so many unnecessary spins involved in all of it that all I see is just spinning. Like, all I see is just like kaleidoscope, pinwheel, spinning visions.
There's one point where, to kick the other guy in the head, he like flips his body all the way around, where he basically kicks him in the head with both feet by just flipping his body 180 degrees around, and then it's hard to physically describe what's going on.
But he does a full spin and a half horizontally, and then his foot goes up. It's a kung fu movie.
Yeah,
move.
he also winds up on the ground at the end of this, and then there's a bunch. He does a bunch of those moves. The one thing that really drives me nuts is when guys do these moves where I'm like, that hurt you just as much as it hurt him. I know I can tell that.
Yeah.
And at the same time, his finisher, which they were calling
Fin de Mundo, yeah, end of the world.
Yeah. Fin de Mundo.
Right, I have the French mixed up in my head.
You want to really hit that I. Fin de Mundo. There are no vague vowel sounds in Spanish. There are 5 and only 5 vowel sounds in Spanish, and so that's it.
My favorite name of that move, though, is the WWE name, which is Starship Pain. But it's awesome. It's a corkscrew split-legged moonsault, and he hits it perfectly. Every time.
He makes sure that everybody in the theater can get one last look at his abs.
And we appreciate
Oh yeah,
it.
it's real. It's real. It's real nice. It's real nice.
So the point, though, and there is a point of having this match where the both of them are just being spectacular, is to get them both over as baby faces. By the end, both commentators are on their feet. The whole place is applauding. And Dario Cueto comes out with his briefcase. And despite the fact that Johnny Mundo won, the both of them are standing there like, can we win the money? And
Before we get to that, just also
Yeah.
on like the part of the point of the match. So yeah, it establishes these two guys as the two biggest faces. Very impressive. The crowd likes them. But also a slight difference where Mundo wins, him being the big star. So that even though you're supposed to kind of like Puma more, you see that Puma has a mountain to climb in order to overcome Mundo. And that sort of sets up the whole narrative for the whole 4 seasons, really. Or at least
the rocky and bumpy mountains that are his abs.
I remember people complaining that they didn't put Puma over the first time. And it's like, well, there you go. That's wrestling.
What I really liked about this was that everybody at the end of their match, it was very clear that there was going to be a next chapter in this story, and I wasn't sure where it was going to go, which I know is supposed to be the point of every match on a televised wrestling program, but often is not. They had very contrasting ab styles. I just appreciated that. They both had amazing abs, but two very different ab flavors.
Somebody told me one of Mundo's big ab exercise moves is that he would go to a pull-up bar, and he would bring his legs up and then point his legs straight in the air so he's holding himself completely upside down on a pull-up bar, and then just go straight up and down in reps. And like, that's how you get all those abs, is just do that
All day.
all day long, right?
I told you
Never
once,
eat a carb. Just eat spoonfuls of olive oil and cod.
Wait, is that? I thought it was eat nothing but carbs. Is that what I've been doing wrong?
I don't know. Let's go eat some carbs.
Oh man, I had an all carbs day. I had an all carbs day the other day. I didn't even do it
Yeah.
intentionally. I just
was
got to
carbs
the end
day?
of the day and realized I had only consumed the carbohydrates, and then like occasionally a small protein smeared on a carbohydrate, and then I didn't feel good. It's real bad. Carbs are great, but it's just not all day. We just don't eat a loaf of bread in a
Not
day.
all day, every
It's
day,
not
yeah.
good for you.
Good bread is good though.
So, Doc, what happened at the end of this match? So, Puma and Mundo shake hands.
Yeah,
they want
yeah.
the money. They want to know who's going to get the money.
Dario Cueto, he says that, clearly, Johnny Mundo, you deserve this money. He holds out the open briefcase. Johnny goes to take it. Cueto pulls it back and closes it. And Johnny's like, no, really, give me the money. And Cueto kind of plays keep away with it. And then several of Cueto's goons show up and beat the crap out of both of our new heroes.
Or as the commentary insensitively calls them, gangbangers.
Yeah,
They are, yes.
just call them
Here are
goons.
the gangbangers.
Yeah,
Goons. It's one of the best words we have to describe a person.
Who is it? Goons. Goons. Hired goons. Oh.
So, and though these particular goons were familiar to wrestling fans to various degrees. So, the big guy, Big Rick, was Ezekiel Jackson in the
Big
WWE. And he had been there, like, this was not too long after he was fired
Couple
from
years,
WWE,
I think.
A couple years. And then Cortez Castro is Ricky Reyes, who was in a tag team with Rocky Romero, the Havana Pitbulls in the Indies in
And
the first decade
just
of the
gonna
2000s.
shout out Ricky Reyes. I've met and worked with him a couple times. Nicest guy. He's so friendly
Cool.
and
Yeah, Ricky's
super
cool.
helpful and like super knowledgeable. He's a good dude.
He's a staple on the local scene.
Yeah,
around here these
exactly.
days.
The third guy I didn't know at the time when I first watched this, Mr. Cisco. He ends up playing a very different character later on in Lucha Underground. I wonder
All
if
right,
you'll
well, we'll
notice
get to that,
yeah.
Anyway, they beat the hell out of Mundo and Puma, and Dario Cueto welcomes us to Lucha Underground because these are the rules. He is the evil rich guy who runs the place, and let's see if anybody can eventually actually get one up on him with the deck stacked this hard. And I'm looking forward to seeing the next one.
While it probably wouldn't make for very compelling television, just once I'd like to see a wrestling promotion run by somebody who's known as just like a really nice guy, who just like does nice things for people.
Good luck.
We talked about this a little bit about how the Attitude Era kind of stuck us with this evil authority storyline, and like wrestling has not been able to work its way out.
And it is the old it is a great vehicle for storytelling, right? And it's also because everybody knows that there is a person who runs it, who makes all the decisions,
and everybody knows that wrestlers are horribly exploited by management. So
Right. There have been babyface GMs, like general managers. Usually it's kind of fleeting. I guess the most notable one would be Teddy Long and his several stints on SmackDown as general manager. And like he would always come out and just do fan service. He'd come out, he had a little dance that he did. He had a few catchphrases. He'd be like, holla, 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 everybody. And my favorite thing with that is a SmackDown house show t-shirt I saw once. That was the SmackDown logo, except it said holla, and then the exclamation mark said holla, holla. And then on the back, it said holla back. And I thought that was great. Anyway, he would always come out when the heels were being heels and be like, well, you're going one-on-one with The Undertaker tonight. And everyone would cheer. And like, that's what would happen
or
if a good guy was general manager.
Match.
Yeah, he would set up the rest of the night, and the heels would try and mess with him, and he'd be like, "You don't understand, I'm in charge," and then he'd do more fan service, and it was okay. But you can't hold that on for too long either. Really, I mean, there's too much emphasis on who's in charge in most wrestling, but it makes more sense in Lucha Underground when you're telling the story about a wrestling league instead of just trying to watch the wrestling league. Like if you're a baseball fan, you know who the managers of the teams are, you know who owns Major League Baseball, but you don't expect any of them to run out onto the field and punch the pitcher in the middle of the game. It just doesn't happen. But it would make more sense, like I said, it makes more sense, I think, in Lucha Underground to have an authority figure than most wrestling these days.
So, what are your overall feelings about this first episode of Lucha Underground?
I'm on board, man. I wish, if this had existed when I was younger, I might have enjoyed wrestling at a different point in my life. Like, because the thing is that it just doesn't. When we watch WWE, it just never seems like very good television, right? Like it's always like even when the wrestling is good, it's still not good TV, and it's just there are expectations that come with that. And maybe that's a closed-minded way of approaching it. Like maybe it's supposed to be more. Maybe it's rooted in a time when it was supposed to be more like sports, and everybody thought of it more like sports, and that's what it is. And that it's just nice to see something that understands its TV and is not even really that different. Like if you were to describe it to somebody, it wouldn't necessarily be that different. No, it's pretty different actually. now that I'm saying, but it's like the structure is the same. Like there's like backstage drama, and there's all the stuff, and the fights are supposed to be stages in character arcs and stuff like that. But it's just done really well. I really liked it.
A few differences I want to mention. One, I love the pre-blood stained mat. Like they have the big Aztec symbol in the middle, but it's also like. It looks like it's been used for a while, even though this is the first show.
They do a good job of doing things that a pilot, you really want a pilot to do. This is something we talked about when we were making the pilot for this podcast, like creating the feeling that this is a thing that's been happening for a while, and you finding out about it now means you are late to the party, and you got to get on board quick. Like, look, they've already been doing this shit. They've already been wrestling all these men. Look at how grimy this place is. They engrimed this. You missed out on all of that, but now you can get in on it. Yeah, exactly.
Another
tetanus.
cool thing about it is...
I've trained at places that were tetanus before.
Another cool thing about it is that all the backstage vignettes, which is where all the kind of supernatural stuff happens or whatever, the announcers act like they don't see any of that.
Yes, that's very important.
And the crowd who's there for the TV taping hasn't seen any of that. So from their perspective, it's just this underground fight club that they're going to watch. Then as the viewer of the TV show, you get in on what's actually happening, which has all of these other layers.
I like that because as long as they can keep it consistent, it's fine. It's like WWE never has been able to keep it consistent.
Right. Like something happens backstage and the wrestlers act as if you couldn't have just watched that from watching the show. Like
Right.
I guess also like in the WWE and their backstage stuff, it's it's shot sort of like reality TV, and I think they try to make it seem like it's real, and just the choice to stylize it and the choice to basically just put in this kind of cheesy drama, this like fucking 100% like Tuesday nights at 7 on TNT kind of drama, but it just work. It's that's the thing. You don't have. It feels like you don't have to do that much. Like
You really don't.
You really just have to put in a little bit of effort into your storytelling, into your connective tissue to make a really compelling framework upon which you can then hang really good wrestling matches.
So, can I say something to your point about it? The WWE just not being good TV. During the actual Attitude Era on the WWE, that was great TV. People wanted to watch it every week. The matches, a lot of the times, were just garbage.
Yeah.
But it was great TV. For many years after the Attitude Era, they were trying to recreate it, and the TV was terrible. It's like, you know how like grunge was incredible, and then post-grunge, which lasted much longer, is a lot spottier, but it was, what they had because the scene was over, but people still wanted to kind of... That's the Attitude Era versus the next several eras. When you watch 1999, when you watch an episode of Raw in 1999, it has a crazy sense of urgency. Like, you never know what's going to happen, and there's explosions everywhere, and there's The Rock, and there's crazy crap happening. And if you watch an episode of Raw from 2004, like, there might be some good wrestling on it, but a lot of references of stuff that was cool 6 years ago. And then they do the ass cream sketch, and it's like, this isn't good.
I think the most thrilling moment that happened outside of a match that I've seen in any of the WWE stuff we've seen so far was in Royal Rumble '99 when Stone Cold rides the ambulance back to the ring. That
Technically, that was part of the match, but go on.
At least of something that happened outside of a ring. But that's like, because that is a moment of great television. That is a moment of...
Or on Raw, when Austin drove the beer truck to the ring and hosed down McMahon and all his goons with beer.
Right. Vince on the mat, calf drowning, doing like beer angels with his angry face.
What year?
And then a couple years later, when, in response to that, Kurt Angle drove his milk truck to the ring and sprayed everyone with milk because he's an American hero that drinks milk instead of beer.
What year was the...
Yes, milk is much worse.
What year was the act of McMahon incest? What year was the year when Shane ate his father's butt live on TV? Or Vince
that was 2006.
Okay, so that was more just trying to
2006,
reclaim.
Yes.
That was deep into the whole deep.
Yeah, I guess they're really the Lannisters of wrestling. I mean, just because they've actually had sex with each other, so in a way that I don't think the Flairs actually.
I mean, rumor was Vince was trying to push a straight incest angle.
Yeah, Vince wanted to do a full-on incest angle where, I don't know, Triple H and Stephanie's child was really Vince's or something.
Everyone vetoed it immediately. Wow. They were like, "No, Vince, we're not doing that."
I'm trying to pick just to put myself in the mind of the writer who's like, all right, I'm about to lose my job because I'm going to say no to Vince McMahon.
Triple H and
because
Stephanie
I can't do this. I cannot.
And Linda was like, no, Vince. Linda was still in the company at the time, and she's like, we're not doing. I'm certainly not taking any part of this. Oh God. Right. So Lucha Underground is much better television.
I'm going to wrap this up.
Yeah. Thankfully. Yeah.
Yes. I'm genuinely looking forward to watching episode 2, which we'll probably talk about in an upcoming
it'll be sooner than later,
or perhaps a previous minisode because of the way that time works.
Let's make sure that doesn't happen.
Premium listeners, as always, we really appreciate your support. It's genuinely helping us. paying for a Zoom Pro account and transistor and all of that stuff and batteries, because it's all the little things. That's it. It's those 3 things, really. But there's in the future there will be more things that we'll need money for. And then Ben went to go show you the stickers that we got, which are great.
It's our ever get to see you in person again.
And remember, guys, the Paw Patrol, not your friends. They are snitch dogs.
No, not your friends.
If you see the Paw Patrol coming, start filming them.
Yeah. Fuck the police. They were forced to cut the verse about the Paw Patrol because there were too many
radio
threats.
Format. They needed to keep the song.
Yeah.
That's why that's what they needed to cut out of that song for radio format. All the rest of it
Paw
stayed
Patrol
in.
paid the networks off.
So yeah, don't show your kids that.
Dogs.
That's what's important. This has been Contesting Wrestling. Hit us up on Twitter at ContestingW if you have thoughts, feelings, things.
Give us money.
Or if you don't have any thoughts and feelings and are a zombie, as the philosophers call it, tell us about that too.
Yeah, I think they're called bots.
Yeah, if you are a void where there should be things, but instead there is nothing, but you also have access to Twitter, then yes, please reach out to us on Twitter and express what it's like for you to exist in the world as a thing that cannot exist. That sounds fun.
That for whom there is nothing that it is like to exist.
They gave Ben a doctorate for this crap. It's ridiculous. All right,
this
has been Contesting Wrestling. It's like, Dave.
Hey,